Evening, traveler. Pull up a chair and warm your hands by the stove while the autumn wind rattles the shutters outside. My name is Sheriff Silas, and I've spent plenty of years keeping the peace in this corner of the 1880s frontier. Folks often think a lawman's life is defined by high-speed chases and drawdowns in the dusty street. But more often than not, the real trials happen behind closed doors, where greed and quiet deceit try to pass themselves off as honest misfortune. Take what happened over at the Miller and Sons freight office just last month. Old Thomas Miller, a man who built his shipping business on a handshake and a sterling reputation, came walking into my office right before the midday bell. He didn't look angry, he looked hollowed out. He set his hat on my desk, dropped his gaze to the floor, and said, "Silas, someone's been altering the Weibull records and skimming the shipping fees right out of our cash drawer, and the books point straight at my own flesh and blood." Now, when a father starts doubting his own son, it cuts deeper than any iron blade ever could. Thomas's youngest boy, Julian, had been working as the chief clerk for nearly a year, handling the ledger entries every single evening. The townsfolk were already whispering that the boy had expensive tastes and had skipped town with the till. But in my line of work, you don't hang a man's good name on village gossip. I told Thomas I'd walk over to the freight office and take a quiet look at the numbers myself, because truth has a stubborn way of hiding right in plain sight if you take the time to read it properly. When I stepped into the freight office, the smell of fresh pine and ink hung thick in the air. The heavy oak desk sat beneath a barred window, holding the grand ledger where every incoming dray wagon and outgoing shipment was recorded in permanent black ink. Thomas unlocked the small desk drawer where the daily cash takings were kept, showing me the neat piles of paper scrip and silver coins. It was short by over $300, a devastating sum for a modest family business heading into winter. Thomas swore up and down that only he and Julian possessed the unique brass key to that drawer, and that the drawer was always locked tight the moment they closed up shop at sunset. Naturally, people pointed to Julian because the boy had been seen purchasing a new pair of leather riding boots down at the Mercantile just 2 days prior. But when I tracked young Julian down at the livery stable, he wasn't packing saddlebags to run away from the law. He was calmly brushing down a tired bay mare, looking me straight in the eye with a clear, steady gaze. When I asked him about the boots, he pulled a faded ledger receipt straight from his vest pocket without a second of hesitation. He hadn't bought them with stolen gold. He had saved up his own wages for 6 months to surprise his father with a proper pair of work boots for his birthday. Julian didn't steal the money, and he hadn't fled town. That meant the missing cash and the altered waybills weren't the work of the young clerk at all. Someone else in that office had access, and someone else knew how to mimic the precise handwriting in the ledger. Instead of rounding up suspects or jumping to hasty conclusions, I decided to examine the physical ledger itself with a magnifying glass and a steady lamp. I sat at Thomas's desk while the evening shadows stretched long across the room, turning back the heavy paper pages week by week. That was when I noticed something curious in the ink strokes. While Julian's handwriting was sharp, slanted, and entirely consistent throughout the earlier months, the recent entries showing the altered shipping fees were written with a slightly heavier hand, with the loop of the letter E rounded off in a way Julian never wrote. More importantly, I checked the carbon copies of the waybills that were supposed to be sent down to the railway depot every Tuesday morning. When I rode down to the station master to cross-reference the manifests, the station master pulled his files and showed me an entirely different set of numbers. The waybills filed at the depot matched the original cash totals, but the master ledger back at the office had been altered afterward to create a deliberate discrepancy. Someone wasn't just stealing cash out of the drawer, they were keeping a double set of books to make it look like the drawer was short, while pocketing the difference on the sly. And the only other person in that office who understood how the Weibull filing system worked from top to bottom was Thomas's longtime business partner, a man named Arthur who had handled the administrative books for over a decade before Julian ever set foot in the building. When I confronted Arthur down at the general store the following morning with both sets of papers in hand, the old man didn't even try to reach for a pistol. He simply looked down at his boots, let out a long, weary sigh, and admitted that mounting debts back east had tempted him into a very foolish mistake. He had been altering the master ledger late in the evenings after everyone else had gone home, trusting that suspicion would naturally fall upon the young clerk. We recovered the hidden cash tucked safely behind a loose floorboard in the office backroom, and Arthur made full financial restitution before quietly boarding the eastbound stage for good. Thomas and his son Julian reconciled right there beside the loading dock, their family bond restored and the boy's good name cleared entirely fair and square. You see, partner, people often think detective work is all about fast horses and loud guns, but more often than not, it's just about patience, checking your numbers, and refusing to let hasty rumors destroy an innocent person's life. The fire in the stove is burning low, and the stars are shining clear and bright over the frontier ridge. Until our next case file is opened, keep your ledger clean, your heart steady, and your dealings honest. Good night, partner.